At the same time, one should not overestimate the importance of the truth scheme. First of all, our acceptance of the truth scheme and its instances should not lure us into the trap of thinking that the truth predicate is really ultimately redundant, that we could always eliminate it in favor of a sentence that does not include the truth predicate. At first glance, one might think, since snow is white is true, if and only if snow is white, instead of saying to you, snow is white is true, I might just as well say from the start, snow is white. Up to equivalence, there is no difference between my two assertions, and hence I can always eliminate the truth predicate, if I like. The concept of truth is superfluous, really. Wrong. The reason is that this recipe of elimination works only for assertions of sentences of the form A is true. But take either of the following two sentences. The last sentence asserted by Caesar is true. And the other one, every sentence that is provable in mathematics is true. I do not know which sentence exactly was the last one to be asserted by Caesar, let alone whether that last sentence is true, but I do still understand the sentence, the last sentence asserted by Caesar is true. And I cannot replace that sentence by an equivalent sentence that does not include the truth predicate. The problem is that the last sentence asserted by Caesar is not stated within quotation marks here. And since I do not know what was Caesar's last sentence either, I cannot say that sentence directly without invoking the truth predicate. In the case of every sentence that is provable in mathematics is true, the problem is that it ascribes truth to infinitely many sentences, really. While in the history of mankind, human beings will actually prove only finitely many mathematical theorems, infinitely many mathematical theorems are provable, are such that they could be proven in principle from the axioms of mathematics by the rules of logic, if only we had the time, space, energy, and so on to do it. The sentence above says about all of these infinitely many provable theorems that they are true. And we cannot express that thought in any other way than by using the truth predicate. In particular, we cannot simply state all provable mathematical theorems directly, or otherwise we would have to formulate an infinitely long sentence of the form mathematical theorem T1 and mathematical theorem T2 and mathematical theorem T3 and ad infinitum. The truth scheme does not tell us for either of our two examples how to reduce them to sentences that would not involve the truth predicate. So the power of the truth scheme is restricted. Secondly, the truth scheme T is not by itself the answer that Tarski hopes to give to our main question, what is truth? This is because the truth scheme is not itself the intended definition of the term true. As such, it would not be formally correct, as it does not have the right form. It is but a scheme, a pattern. The A in A is true if and only if A is but a slot or a blank. Once the slot or blank is filled in, the result is a concrete sentence. But as the answer to our main question, we want a concrete sentence of the form for all x, x is true if and only if blah 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 from the start. A sentence which defines true, much as we had defined grandfather of before by for all x, for all z, x is the grandfather of z if and only if blah blah blah. You might think, the variables x and z in our definition of the term grandfather of are also a little bit like slots or blanks. The only reason why we do not mind their presence is because they make perfect sense together with the two instances of for all at the beginning. Indeed, we could always in principle replace x and z by pronouns in natural language. We could say, for every two persons, one is a grandfather of the other, if and only if there is a y such that the one person is the father of y and y is the father of the other person, or there is a y such that the one person is the father of y and y is the mother of the other person. This would be harder to read, but not really different in meaning. In a similar way, we can also get rid of y in this definition in favor of some standard pronoun in natural language, if we want to. But now you might wonder, couldn't we fill in the blank in the truth scheme accordingly by putting for all A in front of it? For all A in quotation marks, is true if and only if A. Why not take that as a definition of truth? Well, in principle, this might be an option, but one would first need to explain how this goes exactly and what exactly is meant by it. For instance, let us try to express the new proposal in natural language again. If one does so, presumably, one ends up with something like this here. For every sentence or proposition, it, maybe in quotation marks, is true if and only if it. On the left-hand side of the if and only if, one tries to mention an arbitrary sentence or proposition, while on the right-hand side, one intends to use, that is, to state the same arbitrary sentence or proposition without quotation marks. And the idea would be to have one pronoun, one variable as it were, which does both of these jobs simultaneously. The for all at the beginning would have to reach into quotation marks on the left of if and only if it's for sentences at least, whereas to the right of if and only if, it would have to supply the pronoun it with the range of sentences or propositions that the it substitutes for. Turning something like that into a definition of truth may well be possible, but at least at first glance it is not clear how one should understand a sentence such as the above, what one would be allowed to infer from it, and so on. It's simply not a familiar sentence of English, nor of any of the more standard languages in science or philosophy, and it would need some work to turn it into one. That is why Tarski does not regard the truth scheme as a definition of truth itself, nor does he try to turn it into a definition of truth directly. Instead, he suggests a more roundabout way of defining truth. However, he does use the truth scheme as a measure of success. Only if the truth equivalences that one can generate from the truth scheme are derivable from the official definition of truth, the definition will be materially adequate. And only if the definition is materially adequate, it will be satisfactory.